Alright, this one is another book that could have gone into a couple different categories, but at the end of the day I decided to give it Best BOOKMAIL. So this was my favorite book that I read this year that came from one of you fine folks out there, and that is Best Friends by Ruby Jean Jensen. This book was sent to me by the ever wonderful Juan over at Plagued by Visions. Anyone who's watching this channel knows who Juan is. If you don't, then you've stumbled upon me for some odd reason. I'm okay, I guess, but seriously, go check out his stuff because he is way beyond anything that I'm doing over here. This book was sent to me by him, as I said. It was sent to me by him because in a haul a long while back, I got another book that kind of mirrored this one, and he said, oh, they would look really great together, and I think you should experience Ruby Jean Jensen, because I hadn't. And man, I'm glad I did. I can understand now why Ruby Jean Jensen's books are so highly sought after and so collectible now. I can understand why they're so expensive. One, they always have killer covers, and two, she was one of the few people writing at the time, during the era that is trashy horror, who could actually write a really great novel, and this was a really great novel. This is about a boy who has some imaginary friends that maybe are a little more dangerous than your average imaginary friend. It's a super gruesome, awesome book. Ruby Jean Jensen writes some great characters. One of the few books where I felt that the children actually acted like children, and I don't know why that's such a hard thing for people to do, but it seems like every book that I read where kids are supposed to be kids and adults are supposed to be adults, there's this weird intertwining where the kids think adult thoughts, and that doesn't happen here. Everyone acts their age. The monsters are super horrific, and Ruby Jean Jensen clearly knows her stuff. So, thank you, Juan. I don't think I would have been able to experience this book without you, and for that, I cannot thank you enough, because this was genuinely one of my favorite books that I read this year. Now, as to the most original book that I read this year, I say most original, I guess I mean most unique as well. And while all the books I've shown off so far and the other books that I have to show you are, of course, excellent, they are my favorites, my top of the year, I can say, you know, oh, I've read books about children with dangerous imaginary friends. I've read books about folk horror. I've read books about werewolves and zombies and blah 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 blah. So yes, I've experienced all those things. What I've not experienced are the things that I found in Lowland Rider by Chet Williamson. Despite being 350 pages, I just ate it up so quickly. I could not get enough. I mean, I thought it was so cool, you know. The stories about this guy who loses his family to gang violence, and in the process basically loses his mind. So he ends up deciding that he is going to live down in the subways, finds out that there is an entire ecosystem of other people who already live down there, and more, they are all being stalked by a serial killer, possibly more than one, and these serial killers are all directed by one entity who may be a man, who may be a biblical evil, and who may not exist at all. So, and all these things come together in a way that, you know, no, it's not always perfect. Some of the dialogue is cheesy, and some of the scenes are a little unbelievable, but there's just nothing like it. There is nothing out there like Lowland Rider that I have ever experienced. And this was just such an enjoyable novel. So I can't explain it in any better way. I haven't read anything like Lowland Rider, and I don't think I ever will. I think this book is pretty much its own, and I'm okay with that, because I can promise you it's always going to have a place on my shelf. And the next award goes to the most nostalgic, and this one again could have gone in a couple different directions, but I picked this book because overall it brought me back to my own childhood and the books that I grew up knowing and loving, the books that made me a reader. It includes my very favorite holiday, which of course brings just a flood of memories with it. Some good, some bad. It's by one of my favorite authors from that time period. And, well, let's just get with it. Trick or Treat by Richie Tankersley Cusick. Now, this book, as I said, wins for a variety of reasons. Has an excellent cover that just screams classic horror, classic Halloween to me. Of course, it takes place around Halloween time, which is my most favorite time of the year. It is a 90s point horror by Richie Cusick, and all these things combined, every page, man, it was like going back to my childhood. It was reliving some of my favorite memories. It takes place in a small town. I know there are so many of those awesome point horrors out there. Honestly, in any given year, a lot of them could end up on a list, but this one this year ended up on it for me, just because it hit so many sweet spots in regards to nostalgia. It just, like I said, brought me back to that time, and it was just a really great read. Of the point horror authors, Richie Cusick was definitely one of the better, in my opinion, one of my favorites. And Trick or Treat is a great one. It's a classic setup for them. If you've read point horror before, you probably know the direction it's going. You know how things are going to be laid out. But this one is just done so smoothly that it's hard to find fault. Classic setup. New girl moves to town into a new creepy house. Weird things start to happen. She doesn't know what's going on. You know, people will tell her basically that horrible things are going to happen because she lives in that particular house. People start doing these mean things, you know, mean pranks, and that scarecrows showing up outside her window, things like that. And the horror just ramps up from there. But excellent read. Gorgeous, gorgeous cover. I love this cover. And I love this book. This is a book that takes me back, and when I'm in a nostalgic mood, this is the kind of thing I want to read. Alright, let's talk for a minute about the biggest surprise of the year. This is one that completely caught me off guard. I did not expect to enjoy this book nearly as much as I did. I thought it was going to be a very middle-of-the-road type read, if I even finished it at all, honestly, because it was by an author that I had never heard of. It just had a somewhat interesting premise, and I think I recall someone way back when it first came out who said, hey, this is a really good book, you should read it. I can't even remember who it was, but it was on my list, and I decided on a whim one day to pick it up for a couple bucks. Why not? And then I started reading, and wow. So, the biggest surprise of the year for me was Blood and Other Matter by Caitlin Beavis. Now, this is a weird one in that it seems geared towards a young adult audience, but then you start reading and things get really, really dark. Starting with the fact that the main point of the book is that this girl goes to a party, she wakes up the next morning with no recollection of what happened, and What the heck? She is covered, absolutely drenched in blood. It is not her own. She doesn't know who the blood belongs to, but she's just drenched in it. Her clothes are gone, and she is absolutely horrified. So she goes running off to her best friend's house, and it's kind of up to them to piece together what happened. So as I said, this book seems like it's geared towards a young adult audience. There is, you know, sort of that typical romance going on between the two best friends, kind of, but not really. You know, there's the whole high school thing going on, and parties and cheerleaders and jocks and yada yada yada, you know, the whole high school clique thing. So there are a lot of things that lend this book to being a sort of young adult venture, but then there's a lot that doesn't. There are scenes of dismemberment, scenes of extreme violence and gore. There are mentions of attempted rape and molestation, and other similar very, very dark sort of features. So I think that's part of the reason this book caught me off guard so much, is that I fully expected just your typical teen romance, maybe something to that effect, you know? And instead, I got a genuinely creepy horror novel that, while it may still be for a younger audience, it absolutely does not pull punches, man. I mean, this book just, it goes for it, and I love that. I loved it. The main character, she was great. She was a strong female who was not afraid to kick butt, but who also acted in very realistic ways. Overall, the mystery of what the heck happened is a great one. The horror is terrific. The scenes are scary, and it was a huge surprise. So don't judge a book by its cover with this one, guys. Give Blood Another Matter a chance. I'm telling you, you're going to like it. Alright, we're down to the last three, guys. This one is Best Homage, which will go to the novel I think did the best job of acting as an homage to the classic horror films of old, the Hammer films that we all know and love, and that have been the basis for horror since then. So for this one, again, a very easy answer: The Torturer by Peter Saxon. Now, I learned something very interesting when I acquired this book, and I learned it from one of the most intelligent individuals that any of us on here know, Mr. Michael K. Vaughan. Now, Michael K. Vaughan explained to me that Peter Saxon is not just one individual. Peter Saxon is a collection of authors who all grouped together to write a whole bunch of trashy, sleazy novels back in the day, most of which are not that great, but they were basically just cashing in on the whole black magic, voodoo, hoodoo, hammer horror, Satanism kind of panic that was going on at that time. And this is one of those novels, considering that it says a black magic novel of terror, a terrifying supernatural novel of undying evil. Now, this book is excellent homage to those movies and to horror of that time, to the whole feel of horror at that time. It is kind of a classic setup. There is a castle that's been sitting there for 300 or 400 years. It's been abandoned for a long time now because some awful stuff happened there, and no one even knows who owns it anymore. This group of young amateurs decides that they are going to film a horror movie there and make bukus of money. They all show up at this place where, again, people have not been at for a very long time. And before they even actually make it into the castle, there are some serious signs that they're in danger and they all need to leave. Knowing what we know about horror, and especially about horror of that time, do you think that any of them decide to leave? Any of them decide that maybe their life is not worth a couple bucks off of a cheesy horror film? No, of course not. They all go in, and awful, horrible, tragic things happen then. And they kind of deserve it. So, this novel is an interesting pick for me because it is not the most well written. You can tell that it could have been very well written, but there are still editorial issues throughout. That said, it was a friggin' blast. There were some genuinely scary, creepy, cool, gory, gutsy moments in this book all throughout. It has that awesome, excellent feel of a classic horror movie, and if this is not a horror movie, I don't know why it isn't, because it reads like it was written to be turned into one at that time. If you like those kinds of movies, you need to find a copy of this book. It's awesome. I enjoyed every moment of it. Was it the scariest thing I've read? No, of course not. Was it the most well written? No. Was it one of the most enjoyable and a book that I'm going to read again and again over the years? Abso-friggin-lutely. The Torturer by Peter Saxon. Pick yourself up a copy if you can, and if you're a fan of horror films of old. Now, for my most emotional read of the year. And some of you might immediately be thinking, oh, that's right. He read Watership Down. Some of you might be thinking, oh, that's right. He read Laws of the Skies. Well, it's not those books. It's not those books. No. This is one that came way out of left field. Another one that could have taken surprise category for me, but in this case, most emotional for a very particular reason, and that is Driver's Ed by Carolyn B. Cooney. Now, this is another one that came out in the time of the point horror. I don't think it's actually a point horror, but Carolyn B. Cooney, most of us know who she is, and this is about a group of individuals in a driver's ed class who basically take advantage of the fact that the teacher just does not give a crap. He's never paying attention to anything that's going on, and so they use these opportunities to do crazy, ridiculous things while driving one of the school cars. And they're all in a bid to try and get their driver's license first so that they can do these crazy, ridiculous things in their own vehicles. But basically, one day, one of them comes up with this nifty idea to start stealing signs off of streets. Street names, caution signs, slippery when wet signs, whatever they can get their hands on. And thanks to that, tragedy strikes. And that's it. That's all I'm going to talk about. This book gets most emotional for me because Carolyn B. Cooney, she surprised the heck out of me by holding no punches. She shows what can happen due to one person or a group of people's stupid mistakes. How it can completely alter the lives of everyone involved indefinitely, and how sometimes there's just no happy ending. And this book got very emotional for me because well, it felt personal in a way. It's one of those things that could happen to any of us. The stupidest little thing could cause the alteration of lives, and whether we realize it or not. And in this case, it shows the aftermath of that in such a raw, emotional, real way that this is one of those few books that made me tear up. And I don't mean few books this year, I mean few books, period, that I have ever read in my life. And this one did it. So, Carolyn B. Cooney, congratulations. You squeezed a couple tears out of my stone heart. And for that, you get most emotional book of the year. Alright folks, this is it. This is the final book. This is the one. The only one that I'm actually kind of sort of ranking as the best of the year. And for me, this is a book that I have heard about time and time again over the years. I never picked it up. Finally got to it this year, and it blew me away. It was everything I hoped it could be and more. Some of you may already know, because I called this way earlier in the year that it was going to be my best book of the year, and it turned out to be accurate. And that is Harvest Home by Thomas Tryon. Now, this is another book that kind of has a cult following at this point. It's a book that is almost universally loved. Everyone who picks this book up loves it to some degree. And for me, it was just everything I wanted in a horror novel. I love folksy horror. I love small town horror. I love horror that takes place in the autumnal season. I love quiet horror. Things where it's not just about a body count, it's about little things happening behind the scenes that are so much scarier, and that is exactly what Harvest Home gives you. It is everything that I could want in a folksy, small town horror, guys. And I'm not going to say anything else about it. If you have not read this, go buy yourself a copy. If you can't afford a copy, let me know in the comments below, and I will buy you a freaking copy because I want other people to experience this book. And that is it, guys. That is my final wrap-up for my top books of the year. It's a lot, and it definitely ended up as more than one video, but that's okay. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me which of these books are your favorites, which ones you want to get to this year. Maybe I can help some of you out. But that's it. 2021 was an excellent year for me in many different ways. And it was a really busy year. So I'm surprised that I got to as many books as I did. But to have this many incredible reads is just astounding. So I'm really hoping that 2022 brings even better tidings. But we'll see how things go. So thank you as always for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you can give me some suggestions down below for books that might make it on to next year's list. And as always, thank you. Have a great day. Stay safe. Drink awesome coffee. Cheers, guys. A serial killer, or possibly multiple serial killers.
Okay, I found this on the web for Hey Serial Killers.